Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome inside on such a beautiful day. We're very glad you're here. A very spiritual concert for this weekend, something unusual for us to put two wonderfully spiritual pieces together, and one of them involves our beloved principal cellist, Roman Mekinulov. So I'm going to skip that, and we're going to have Roman join us in a few moments, and I'll tell you a little bit about the second half of the concert. We're performing one of the three great requiems that we have in our repertoire, the Brahms Requiem this weekend. And the other two you've heard, and I know many of you know them, Mozart Requiem and the Verdi Requiem. Very different in every way from the Brahms Requiem. Mozart Requiem, some of you remember that Mozart was visited at the end of his life. He was very ill and living in a very difficult situation. He was visited by a masked stranger who asked him to write a requiem. And Mozart conceived the idea that this was a messenger from God, telling him that the end was near and he was now to write his own requiem. So Mozart wrote his requiem in that frame of mind as a very, very devout Catholic with a great fear of the afterlife, a great fear of death. And so the Mozart Requiem is one of the most heartrending things we have in the music, in that he's pleading with God to forgive him and to take him to heaven, and in a voice that, in a soul that really believed strongly in the possibility of hell. So the Mozart Requiem was filled with entreaty and pathos. Verdi Requiem, also a very powerful piece. Verdi had, well, a very complicated relationship with God. I mean, we'll never know exactly what that was, but there was a lot of anger in Verdi's relationship with God. After Verdi lost his very young wife and two small children within a month of each other to a disease, he never quite felt the same way about God again. Never went to church ever after that. But he still was a Catholic, and some part of him believed very deeply. But his Requiem, it's like an opera. It's a very dramatic confrontation, let's say, between man and God, about how God can help his children, and how sometimes how cruel he can be to his children. So this is a very, very overwhelming requiem based upon Verdi's own feeling. Brahms' Requiem is totally different. It's a requiem of great consolation and gentle tranquility and comfort. And it's different in really every way. The exact title of Brahms' Requiem is Ein Deutches Requiem, a German Requiem. And that's not because Brahms was German, because Mozart was German. It's because Brahms wrote the Requiem in a totally different way. It didn't even really start out as a Requiem. When a composer set a Requiem Mass, and many, many composers have set the Requiem Mass, they take the exact Latin text from the Mass for the Dead. And that's what they set, and that's what Mozart said, and that's what Verdi said. So you have the Agnus Dei, you have the Kyrie, you have the Dies Irae, all of the set parts of the Mass in Latin that correspond to the Mass for the Dead. Brahms did not do that at all. In fact, it's not really a Requiem Mass. It's not a Mass. What Brahms did, as a Lutheran, he went to Martin Luther's Bible. Martin Luther had, in his time, translated the Bible into German. And he selected passages from both the Old and New Testament and grouped them together. And the passages are about loss and about seeing people again and being comforted. So they do deal with the concept of a departed loved one. But it's not a Mass at all. These 7 movements are taken from passages that Brahms particularly thought would comfort people. And it makes for a very different experience. It's not really a prayer for the dead in a way. It's a hymn of comfort for those who remain. And I want to tell you a little bit about the movements. These 7 movements evolved over time. The piece did not start out, as I mentioned, as a requiem. Brahms worked on this for 13 years. He actually started one of the early movements, the second movement, he wrote right after Robert Schumann died in 1856. And the Requiem was not finished till 1868, so it was gestating for a long time. When Robert Schumann died, Brahms was devastated because Schumann was his hero, he was his idol, he was his mentor, and he was the one who actually made it possible for Brahms to have a career. And Brahms was devastated, and he felt that in honor of Schumann, he would do the one thing that Schumann wanted him to do, had wanted him to do. he would write a symphony. Because Schumann kept encouraging him, saying, you are the successor to Beethoven. You have to carry on this mantle. And that was exactly why Brahms was frightened of writing a symphony. He felt this giant behind him, the giant of Beethoven. But he knew Schumann wanted him to, and he tried. And he couldn't quite do it. Instead, that piece, that enormous piece that he was working on, we know now because he turned it into a piano concerto. It's his first piano concerto. That was the piece that he had hoped to be able to turn into a symphony, and changed it. For that piece, for that symphony piano concerto, he wrote a second movement, very solemn, very sober. It was really, in a way, a kind of saraband on the death of Robert Schumann, this kind of tragic thought that he was going to put in the piano concerto. And at some moment in his creative process, he decided he would not use that movement for the piano concerto. He used a different second movement, also very beautiful, but not this movement. But he never discarded this movement, and he came back to it 13 years later and made it into the second movement of his Requiem. So this is the earliest part of it. But let me take them in order. So it started out, again, with this one piece that Brahms didn't know what to do with. He turned it into a kind of cantata, 4 movements with chorus. Wasn't quite sure what he was going to name it. And then in 1865, his mother died. And at that point, it was clarified in his mind that he would make this into a requiem for her, Christian Brahms. And he added a couple of movements to it and gave the first performance on Good Friday in 1868. And after that, he visited the grave of his mother. And while he was visiting the grave, he heard in his head a line of scripture. And the line was, "You are in pain now, but you will have joy again. I will comfort you as your mother comforted you." And Brahms thought at that point, I want to add one more movement for my mother into this Requiem. So he added the 5th movement. And that's the only movement that has a soprano voice in it. You'll see that our soprano joins us later in the piece. She sings only that one movement, and that's the added movement. I think it's very poignant because she's speaking, perhaps singing as he imagines his mother would sing, and the text says, as your mother would comfort you. So it wasn't until even after the first performance that the piece finally reached its 7-movement shape. So let me take you through those 7 movements. And you'll see they're not mass movements, but they are very profound and very moving. The first movement, it's interesting, rather than starting out with the Kyrie, of course, he starts out with the text that he's chosen. And he says, the very first thing he says, "Selig sind die da Leid tragen. Blessed are you who mourn." So it's interesting. He doesn't even talk about the departed soul. He talks about the people left behind. Blessed are you who mourn, you who carry sorrow in German. Blessed are you who mourn, for you will be comforted. You who sow in tears will reap in joy. So again, Brahms reaches out right at the beginning to the people who are sad at the loss of a loved one. Beautiful, beautiful opening movement. After that movement comes the Robert Schumann movement, and it's very somber, as I said. And this is the darkest and the most sorrowful movement of all, because the text reads, "All flesh is grass, and all of the glory of man is like a flower. Grass withers and flowers fall." It's very, very sad at the beginning, and orchestra has a very stately saraband movement. The chorus sings quietly. But then at the very end, it is a glorious moment, because after singing this several times, that all flesh is grass and man comes to an end, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And the chorus just bursts out into something much more joyful, and they sing a fantastic finale to this movement. "Those who the Lord has saved shall return and come to Zion with songs and joy." And you'll hear that at the end of this movement. So it's a great finish to that movement. Third movement, we hear the baritone for the first time, and he sings again. It's very, very sober. he sings, Lord, let me know my end, the measure of my days. My days are as a handbreadth. My age is nothing before you. Again, it's all about how the life of man is valueless. I mean, God is only what matters. But then at the end, it ends again with a great burst of joy. The souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and nothing shall touch them. Again, the chorus with a beautiful ending. So Brahms always gives us some joy at the end of these sorrowful movements. The fourth movement is very famous. You might have heard it before. It's for chorus alone, and very beautiful. It's how beautiful is thy dwelling place. Brahms talks about what heaven must be like. How beautiful is thy dwelling place, and blessed are those who dwell in the house of the Lord. And that's the fourth movement. The fifth movement, Janice will come out and sing now the words that Brahms heard visiting his mother's grave. Now you have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice. As one whom his mother comforted, so I will comfort you. A quote from Isaiah. So that's maybe the heart of the whole Requiem, that movement. The sixth movement, the baritone sings again, and his singing is always quite stern and somber. And he sings, here we have no continuing city. The one we seek is the city that will come. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet shall sound, the dead shall be raised, and we shall be changed. This is talking about the judgment day. And in the hands of Verdi, if you remember, and Mozart too, the Judgment Day was a terrifying day. I mean, the graves open and the judges, the stern judges there, God is casting people to the left or to the right. A very frightening moment. The chorus does sing with enormous energy, but Brahms directs it in a different way because they continue and they sing, Tod, Tod, wo ist dein Stachel? Tod, or Hölle, wo ist dein Sieg? Death, where is your sting? Grave, where is your victory? So when you hear this very agitated singing, it's not the judge, pronouncing these awful judgments on people. It's people saying, death has no power over us. Where is your sting? Where is your victory? We're saved. That's a great moment, the end of the sixth movement. And then the seventh movement brings back the idea of the first, this kind of gentle comfort. But this time he writes, blessed are the dead, for they shall see God. They will rest, they will have rest, and all of the good that they have done will live forever. So that ends it. So he starts with this beautiful idea of this frame, blessed are those who mourn, and then blessed are the dead at the end. And it is in German. As I mentioned, it's taken from the German Bible, Old and New Testament. Brahms never liked the name Deutsches Requiem. He said, I wish I could change it because it's not what I mean. I want to call it a human requiem. And in a way, it is a requiem for all mankind, if you think about it this way. Brahms deliberately did not use the words Jesus or Christ in the requiem at all. He uses the words Lord and God so that it becomes a requiem for any faith, any religion, any private spiritual belief in a higher being. This requiem makes sense. And he did that specifically. Brahms himself was an agnostic, but he was always searching. He never really knew, or always looking for what would happen. But he gives us this requiem of such quiet comfort and profound feeling. But it's not like the others. As I said, you won't hear this abject entreaty of Mozart, or the tears, or the weeping and the gnashing of teeth and the terror. There are no prayers for the souls of the dead. There's consolation and hope. It's a humanist outlook, and requiem for the living, as strange as that might sound. But in the long run, Brahms just talks about hope and faith in an afterlife where people will be together. It's mostly about love, and it maybe indicates a little bit to us his feelings of such warmth and comfort towards his mother. So it's a very, very beautiful piece. And the fact that it is in German imparts a certain sound to the music too. very different sound. Those of you who've heard operas in German or Italian or English, you know that that's really very much a part of the music, the language that the composer uses. And this German gives it a sense of a kind of weight and heaviness and a textural beauty that you'll hear sung by the chorus and by our two soloists. So that ends our program, the Brahms Requiem. And of course, before a piece like this, it's hard to imagine what to put on the program to open it when you have a piece of such profound spirituality. But I think we found something that is very, very special. In the short piece that you'll hear in the first half is only about 15 minutes long. But it's a very, very special 15 minutes. And the soloist in that piece by John Tavener is our principal cellist, Roman Mekinulov. So Roman has agreed to come out and speak to us about this, and I see the door opening, and here he is, Roman. We're going to have to share the mic. Is that okay? We're going to have to share the mic. We'll sit here. We've got one mic. Roman, I was saying to people that this seems like a very appropriate piece to precede Brahms' Requiem because it's a piece of great spirituality. But I'll give you the background and then let Roman tell you about how he came to this piece. It was an interesting story. There's a woman named Catherine Gould who is a very serious violinist, but she makes her living as a venture capitalist and a very successful living. And she wanted to do something for the music world. She wanted to help musicians, and she conceived the idea that she would use the profits that she had made to create new music, because she felt, as many of us do, that not only is our orchestra a repository of the past, of beautiful pieces like Brahms' Requiem, but we're constantly growing, and new music is being added to our repertoire. She wanted to be a part of that. So she assembled a group of conductors, myself and 2 or 3 other colleagues, and we talked about composers. Who should we commission? Because she needed advice. We talked about a lot of names, and we were intrigued by the idea of Sir John Tavener. Sir John is a very respected, mystical English composer, very, very spiritual and reclusive person. We asked him if he would write a piece for us, and he agreed. So it was very wonderful news. We asked him what he would like to write, and he said, I want to write a piece for cello with the orchestra, with the string orchestra, and I want it to be played by your principal cellist. And I thought, what a fantastic idea that is, to acknowledge the great artists that we have sitting in our principal chair. So Roman and I said yes, not knowing at all what this piece would be like. Now I turn it over to Roman to tell you the rest of the journey.
You want me to say about what I think about it?
When you first saw it?
When I first saw the piece, it was just a cello score, and it looked extremely difficult and made absolutely no sense to me. So, and I practiced this for, I'm going to say I probably got it around February or January. I practiced this for some time, hoping that, love for the piece would come. But it didn't.
No, I'm just telling you this. Roman kept asking me, do you like it yet? And I would say, I don't know, do you like it yet? It took us a long time.
JoAnn was the first one who said the piece has grown on her, but I was still struggling to find anything in common with the piece. So, of course, I haven't heard it, I haven't seen the score by then, and I'm just practicing my part. And it's written very awkwardly, as far as it's very difficult, and as you will see in about 45 minutes probably, you'll see it's all of it is very, very in the upper register. It's almost like a cello singing as a violin. And the problem with playing up there in a cello, as well in a viola or a violin, there is no point of reference. When you're down in a position, there you can train your muscles. That training has to take a double or triple effect up when you play up all the way in upper octaves in the cello, violin, or viola. So I suffered to find anything in common with the piece. And then the first performance came out from Winnipeg. Yes, and I heard that first performance, and I didn't find anything in common still. Even looking at my score, And I keep asking JoAnn, what do you think? Is it growing in you? And JoAnn tried to be very supportive, and she's like, yes. She was very positive about it. And she's like, yes, it's definitely growing in me. So then came recording from a second performance, which was done in Virginia with the principal cellist who played beautifully. And I heard some nice spots of the piece, much better than the one from Winnipeg. And yet I suffer to connect to the piece because my point of about new music is, and that's how I feel about it. If I can connect to the new piece that I play, then I can really convey the piece very convincingly to you, the audience. There are a lot of performers who perform modern music just to perform, check, instead of just really trying to relate to it. Of course, there's a lot of different modern music, some not good, some not very good, some very good, and some just in the medium. So it was very important for me to find something in common with the music, and I struggled to find this. And about maybe 3.5 weeks ago, I get a score of the piece, and in that score there is a composer note, and I don't think I should say it. I will wait till the whole concert starts. I mean, some of it you probably can find out in program notes and somewhere. But I'm hoping to preserve this piece of information until the actual concert. But I had a complete epiphany about the piece. All of a sudden, all the weirdness about it has disappeared, and things cleared up to me, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. And I was jumping like a baby about it, because it was certainly like a monkey off my back, because I really knew exactly what I was going to do about it, and that was a wonderful day. Anyway, so that's coming up very soon.
This epiphany that Roman had, and he shared it with me as soon as it happened. I was very excited. Still meant that he had to find a way to project now his understanding of this piece, his personal understanding of it to you. And in 15 minutes, it's something very unusual in this piece, not at all like Brahms, not like Beethoven. And just keep in mind that Sir John Tavener is a very mystical person, and he's been concerned since at least the last 20 years of his compositional life with the presence of good in the world, the presence of something divine in the world. He himself is an extremely devout Russian Orthodox person, and that has completely consumed his compositional world. This sense of searching for God, our concept of God in the world, and Roman will tell you more about it. But it is very challenging. It lies on only the upper two strings of the cello, and I'm sure that you see when you see Roman playing, as he mentioned, the tension also up in that register is so strong. And maybe you should mention that. I mean, this is very, very challenging, and the fact that you're playing constantly once you come in.
This coincides with difficulties of playing up there. It's strictly a muscle work, right? And it comes with practicing and knowing your spaces, because what Tavener writes sometimes makes sense when you listen to it, but to play it, it's extremely hard. You just have to hit a certain intervals which are very unusual, and the tension of strings increases greatly once you go very high up your fingerboard, from very simple in the first positions, and it gets from about, I don't know, increases by an inch at least, maybe, and that's every note you have to press, you have to really nail it down. That's just one of the difficulties, but I'm not complaining.
What about, I want Roman to comment on the unusual markings in the score, the unusual directions that we have in the score. Things like so tender, he writes. I mean, we're used to sing allegro, ritardando, and, not too fast, not too loud, not too slow. But he writes things like, with unearthly beauty, or transparent, or one that is particularly like flowering like a lotus. And there's a section that sounds very Hindu or Buddhist.
Yes, that one is like a butterfly in Indian style. Yeah, that was.
What did you make of these?
Well, I think this definitely digs into spirituality of the piece, and it's just, it's all those directions that he writes are for performer to try to connect to it. Try to understand what the composers mean, what's the image behind it, and that's about it. But it's definitely has alternative meanings, when he writes those things.
I think one of the real tests was when Roman played this for the first time with the orchestra, how moved they were, because I didn't know what their reaction would be. I mean, they're playing in a very different way than they normally play, and different material, and how would they understand this piece? And they seemed completely drawn into it. So that's a testament to Roman's concept of it, and also his passion for sharing this with you. We're going to end playing you just a few words of Sir John Tavener about the piece. Sir John is very ill and cannot travel, but he did make a little interview tape to tell you a little bit in his words. I don't think Roman has actually heard this.
I did.
You did? Okay, we'll play you just a few minutes of Sir John speaking about this work.
I was glad to be a part of Meet the Composer's Magnum Opus project, and I'm grateful for Catherine Gould's generosity and vision in being the project's founding patron.
Sir John, you're well known for the spiritual horizons in your music. Can you tell us how that's evolving?
I've been very seriously ill for about 2 years, and nowadays I prefer to let the music speak by itself, and I no longer want to spout metaphysics and spiritual ideas. So if the music has them, then I would prefer it came out in the music. Popule Meus, for instance, is based on the liturgical text, O my people, what have I done to you? How have I offended you? I healed your sick, and how do you repay me? In one sense, the cello represents Christ, and the mindless rejection of the mob is represented by the violent music written for the timpani. In another sense, it's based on a universalist concept that God alone is the absolute and everything else is illusion. Although the solo cello and strings and the timpani share the same material, 4 ideas are gradually revealed, and they revolve 4 times during the piece. The timpani music is violent and becomes increasingly frenzied and contracted as the piece continues, while the cello and strings remain serene and still. It may appear, because of the extremely violent nature of the last entry of the timpani, that the timpani wins and darkness wins, but the cello continues in a serene manner and quietly ends the music.
Do you mind if I ask if you're pleased with your end product?
I'm never pleased with the end product, but I can't wait to hear this performance.
Sir John, why do you think your music's so involving in the times that we live in at the moment?
I think because the music is simple and direct, and a lot of the music written today is over-complex and violent, and I think that people need a kind of simplicity and a directness in their lives.
It's a sort of antidote to modern times in a way.
Yes, yes.
Do you write it with that in mind?
No, I just write it because I need to write it.
What is the purpose, then, of meditation within music?
To draw the listener inwards, to interiorize, and to liberate.
And what do you think is missing in people's lives that you feel your work actually gives them?
Maybe, and I only surmise, maybe, a sense of inward peace.